What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking about what I believe might be the best card in the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG that sees absolutely no play. And when I say no play, obviously I'm talking about competitive play and why I think that that might change in the very near future. So what card am I talking about? The card I'm talking about is Mind Control. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be like, Cap G, more like Kappa idiot. What is this guy even talking about? Mind Control is trash. It's always going to be trash. And it always was trash, just like your crappy channel. I mean, that's fine, but in my opinion, Mind Control is not only solid now, and I think that it will become very good in the near future. I think it's actually a really good card now. Now, as for Mind Control's past, and I know people might not want to hear about this, but allow me to give you a quick Yu-Gi-Oh! History lesson because I love doing that. So, Mind Control used to be very, very good. In fact, at one point, it was one of the strongest cards in the game. Really, when Teledad got nerfed and some other synchro decks started creeping up, that's when Mind Control was at the height of its powers, right about the time that we got the starter deck that gave us X-Saber Airbellum. The reason why it was so strong, and if you know anything about the 5Ds era, you know that X-Saber Airbellum was basically, you know, one of the cards that made Synchro Cat such a strong deck. That was the deck that really put Mind Control on the spot because in that meta, it was actually quite common for people to play flip effects, which is one of the big reasons why Mind Control kind of fell out of favor, among other things, which I'll touch on too. Mind Control was used in Synchro Cap because not only was it a spell that you could discard to the graveyard for Summoner Monk, so shoutouts for dual utility, but if you were playing a mirror match, which was extremely common, you could actually take your opponent's flip monsters, you could take their Gravekeeper Spy, summon your own Gravekeeper Spies, make Arcanite Magician, or you could take their Gravekeeper's Guard, you could flip it face up, bounce one of their monsters, and then still synchro summon with it, and it just was a very strong card. Now, one of the reasons that I think Mind Control inevitably fell out of favor because Mind Control is kind of one of those cards that its power it's kind of like tied to whatever the dominant mechanic in the game is. Now, obviously, during the 5Ds era, you know, Synchro was the dominant mechanic, and if you could take your opponent's tuner monster, or if you had a tuner on the field, or if you could take their Synchro, there were a lot of things that you could do with it, but during Zexal, not so much, because if you took one of your opponent's monsters, who's to say that they were even playing an archetype that had, you know, the same levels as you? You guys know that during that era of Yu-Gi-Oh! We had so many, yeah, level 4 was common, but there were so many decks like Mermail and other decks that, you know, Heretics that run like 5 and 6s, where you weren't guaranteed to be able to have, you know, a monster, an NXC monster that had the same rank as what you needed. So it just really didn't work that well. And then the same thing could be said about Arc V, mainly because there's no real way to use Pendulum and Mind Control. The two cards just don't work. But now that we're in the Vrains era and we have our most generic extra deck mechanic yet, I think that Mind Control can really shine when it comes to making Link monsters or really just using Link monsters in general. Hell, you guys know that you don't even really need to have monsters officially in your deck to make Links. You can just play a bunch of, you know, scapegoats and token producing cards, and even those can go into Link monsters. So that's actually one of the big reasons why I think Mind Control is primed for a comeback. Now, I think some people are probably going to say, Cap G, if you think Mind Control is such hotness, why isn't anybody playing it? To be blunt, I think that there are just so many other big play options out there. Mind Control is kind of getting drowned out by its surroundings. I mean, why play Mind Control and possibly do a Link play when you can flip over a Scapegoat and go straight into Boral Dragon and, you know, be guaranteed to have one of the most powerful Link monsters in the game for one card? The same can be said about Gofu or, you know, some of the other cards that might see a little less play like Venus or Brilliant Fusion, etc., etc. You kind of catch my drift. There are so many other like playmaking cards in the game right now. I feel like, you know, Mind Control is getting a little outshined by that. But number one, I think that those cards are not going to stay, well, for the most part, I think that they're not going to stay at like unlimited status forever. I'm looking at Scapegoat and I'm thinking, well, they just hit it in the OCG. I think this card is eventually going to find its way back to limited status. Grinder Golem would be another example of a card that it can produce multiple Link monsters by itself, but that card also just got semi-limited. So I think that some of these other cards that can give you multiple Link monsters or just like Link 3s, Link 4s by themselves that completely outshine Mind Control, they won't be at 3 forever. And at that point, might be looking at Mind Control and thinking, man, did you lose 10 pounds? Did you get sexier? Nope, I was always like this and I was always a solid card. So let me explain why I think Mind Control is pretty good right now. The obvious is right now you can take pretty much any of your opponent's monsters, and most of the time you can convert that into some type of link play. Even if it's just one card, like you're taking your opponent's Dark Arm Dragon, if you summon anything, you can take that and you can turn it into a proxy dragon, or maybe a security dragon when that comes out in the TCG. And that's one of the things that I love about playing Mind Control right now, because like in other eras of Yu-Gi-Oh, it always seemed like there was some other kind of hoop that you had to jump through. You had to either make sure you have a tuner plus a non-tuner, then make sure that you count the levels up right. Or during the XC era, where I told you guys Mind Control wasn't good, it's because you had to worry about matching up the levels. If you wanted to take an XC monster on the field, what if the XC monster doesn't have materials? It's basically just a vanilla beat stick at that point. But right now, just taking any type of monster is kind of useful. It's one of the reasons why you see token producing cards are so prevalent in our meta and in the OCG meta, because tokens can be extremely useful. So even worst case scenario, you take your opponent's token and you can still get something out of that. But another thing that's really awesome is if you take your opponent's link monster, then it gets incredibly crazy, because let's say your opponent has, I don't know, a Firewall Dragon as their only monster on the field, right? Actually, that's a bad example. Let's say BORRELOAD Dragon. That's probably a little bit of a better example. So you take your opponent's BORRELOAD Dragon. It's in their extra monster zone. When it comes to your side of the field, number one, their extra monster zone now is unoccupied, and you get to put that BORRELOAD Dragon on your field wherever you want. This now not only means that you get to open up some extra zones without even having to use the extra monster zone potentially, but if I'm lucky to take actually one of your link monsters that benefits when it is mutually linked, then your own monster could end up working against you. For example, let's just say that I was using Mind Control on your security dragon, or your maybe Trigate Wizard that was only linked up with 2, so you couldn't negate the Mind Control. Or hell, maybe you just felt like it was the first card I threw at you and you didn't want to negate it because you didn't want to get blown out by evenly matched or something like that. Depending on how I make my board and what my potential plays are, I can mutually link that monster up, and I might be throwing that effect right back at your face. So I might end up bouncing one of your cards with Security Dragon. I might end up, possibly banishing one of your cards with Trigate Wizard or something like that. And the downsides of Mind Control, they're really not that big anymore. The fact that the monster can't attack, the fact that the monster cannot be tributed, which is especially irrelevant in today's Yu-Gi-Oh!, and obviously the fact that the monster goes back to its original owner during the end phase, I just feel like none of those are all that important, and they're definitely not deal breakers. As we get more mechanics into the game, those restrictions become less and less important. You guys know, obviously, I talked about how I can take your monster and use its effect, but obviously I can take your link monster and then use it for a link summon itself. So the fact that the monster goes back during the end phase, like, you and I know damn well you never getting that monster back, so you can just get that out of your head right now. And one other thing that I have to mention, because I think that it could be incredibly important, I know a lot of people are not going to want to hear it. They're going to say, no way, Cap G, no how, why are you even talking about this? It's not a possibility. I'm saying it anyways. What if we end up getting a very powerful meta deck that is flip based? Then this card could become even more relevant in the mirror matches. People don't want to think about that, but if we would have had the link summon mechanic when shadows were a big thing, that could have been incredibly relevant back then. Konami has already shown with just End of Reign's era that they are willing to make link based flip decks. I mean, we have crawlers that just came out in Circuit Break, and then we obviously have the Teen Angles, which come out in Extreme Force, if I'm not mistaken. I think the Teen Angles are complete garbage. I think crawlers are kind of slow, but the point is, Konami only has to get one of these motherfucking flip decks right. Like, if we end up getting another Shadows or Gravekeepers or just some type of flip deck that is very fast, and it's maybe like Shadows where it doesn't have to rely on its flip effects, we could see that being another element as to why this card is so powerful in our metagame. So just something to think about. So you guys let me know in the comment section below. This is actually something that I have been thinking about for quite some time. I looked at Mind Control when we really started to understand the Link Summon and Link monsters as a whole, and kind of how easy they were to make. I started looking at Mind Control and I just thought, man, this card could be incredibly useful, especially just being able to not only take your opponent's link monsters, but just being able to take anything, convert those into link monsters, stealing your opponent's link monster to open up zones on your side of the field, stealing their link monster and then mutually linking it and then stealing their effects. Like, it's just a very solid card overall. And I think that as we get more link monsters, I think the card's just going to get better. Whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already. already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos. This video has been brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audible.com/megacapitalG. Over 180,000 titles to choose from on your mobile device. I'm listening to the amazing I Can't Make This Up by Kevin Hart. Link in the description.